Hello and welcome to another episode of Learning to Live in the Present Moment. My name is Ted Robinson and I'm your host today. Today we're going to be talking about, as always, learning to live in the present moment. But what does that really mean and how do we accomplish it? Now, I've shown you lots of mechanical ways of doing presence, so to speak, how to open your eyes and just be here and your mind quiets down. But it's always about the same thing, quieting the mind. And the mind I'm speaking about is the ego mind. That's our left brain, our conscious mind. It's the thing that most of us think we are. In fact, for most of my life, I went around thinking I was my mind. I think all the time. Everything I do, I have to use my mind. If I remember, I have to use my mind. If I speak, I have to use my mind. Even if I'm breathing, part of my mind is working, right? But I'm talking about a specific part of the mind, and it's the ego mind. It's the part that's involved with the past and the future. It's involved with evaluating, judging, collating, organizing, and looking at things and thinking. That's what it's all about. Now you say, well, that's what my mind does. That's my whole mind. And I would suggest to you that's not the case. You see, as a hypnotist, I know that there are three different levels of mind. You have a conscious mind, a subconscious mind, and then an unconscious mind. And here's what they're about. The unconscious mind we're not even going to deal with right now because that's in charge of the body. Keeps the heart running, keeps your blood running, keeps your lungs moving and your diaphragm and all your enzymes and chemicals balanced, okay? So we're not talking about that right now, but that's part of your mind as well. But it's the unconscious part of the mind. Now, the subconscious mind is the largest part, and so when they tell you you only use 5 or 10% of your mind, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about the conscious mind is 5 to 10%, but the rest of it, the largest amount, is the subconscious mind, and that's where your perfect memory exists. Actually, we all have a perfect memory. It's just that our conscious mind can't always recall it, like one of those little things in the amusement park that goes down and picks up the teddy bear and drops it in the slot. That's what our conscious mind is like. For those who have perfect memory, they always have a means of getting to the existing perfect memory we always have. But the subconscious mind is really very important as well. It's where our emotions lie. That's the language of the subconscious. And it's where our programming exists. And programming is all the things that we do automatically in life. Whether you brush your teeth before going to the shower or after, or all those types of things. Whether you open the door, close the door, take the garbage out at particular times, those are all programming. They're utilitarian in nature, but they're all programs. And habits, both good, bad, and utilitarian, are also part of the programming. All that resides in the subconscious mind. So you say, well, isn't it all just one? And scientists have proven, no, it's not all just one. In fact, you have a left brain and a right brain. Your left brain is what we use in school. It's for rote memorization. So when you learn your history lessons, when you learn how to count, it's all in the left brain. All your creative ideas are in your right brain. That's your subconscious mind, where that resides. And the whole idea here is to get them to work better so that they can actually, instead of working against each other, they can work hand in hand. And when that happens, things get really good. So what are we talking about this for when we're really talking about presence? Well, the idea is presence is when you've quieted the left brain down and you're just working in the subconscious mind. Interestingly enough, the subconscious is where you directly connect with nature, the universe, even God. But the right brain, not so much. You can't sort of do it purposely because that's what the right brain does. The right brain, the conscious mind, has goals. It has intentions. It has achievements. It has to do things. It's driven. The right brain, the subconscious mind, is more relaxed, more laid back, more creative-minded, as I said. So how do we get what's all this about and what's it got to do with being present? Well, when you're present, you quiet the left brain and drop into the right brain. And you're just here, reacting to life, just being here, enjoying life the way it is. And that's a really cool place to be. But of course, we also need our ego, right? If we didn't have our ego, we'd have no judge. We'd have no judgment. The problem is with having judgments, you wouldn't know what to wear in the morning. You wouldn't know what color matched what and what to eat for lunch and what to eat for dinner, how to get here or there, what is the best route. All those things happen to be the domain of the egoic mind. However, here's the problem. Most of us get too invested in our left brain, our ego mind, and we judge everything all the time. And that leaves no time for being present. Now, what that also does is it gets us caught up in the past and the future and judgment. We judge this one, we judge that one, we think this is better than that, we think this is lesser than that, and worst of all, we judge ourselves. You ever been the worst judge of yourself? How stupid of me, how could I have done that? That kind of stuff. Well, the ego will tend to turn on you quicker than it turns on anybody else. You're its worst offender because it wants to be perfect all the time. So, what does all this have to do with presence? Well, when you get caught up in the egoic mind, when you're caught in that situation where you think you are the mind and you act from ego all the time, dramas tend to occur much more in your life. Why? Because the ego is always caught in the past and the future. Remember I said that? So if things aren't going according to the ego's plan, for instance, the ego says, let's have a party. Let's have a yard party next week. And next week, as the yard party is, all the invitations are out, people are coming, and a cloudburst occurs, and nobody can be out in the yard where all the decorations are waiting, and it's a disaster as far as the ego is concerned. Of course, everybody stays in the house. They all have fun and everything else, but the ego is off in the corner like, I knew it. Always happens to me. Well, that's the kind of judgment that the ego uses to dramatize life and ruin your day most of the time. That's the problem. So how do you do that? What do you do about that? Well, you watch the ego more carefully. How do you do that? Well, you become the watcher. The watcher is that part of you that watches things, that obviously observes. You can call it the observer, the watcher, whatever you'd like to call it. But it's the part of you that sort of stands back in the background. So I talk about it as being right back up in here someplace, so it can look down upon everything that the ego is looking out at so particularly, and it sort of just watches. It observes. It's a different part of your mind, by the way. It's your subconscious mind, I believe. And it's that part of you that you can just observe things as they're happening. Have you ever done that? You're in a party and all of a sudden you step back in your mind and you just go look around and you can see all the little pitty-patter of people trying to negotiate, trying to manipulate, trying to be something that they're not, or trying to be everything that they are. And you can see it, right? You can see it clearly sometimes. But we can very rarely see ourselves because we're so enmeshed and so caught up in the egoic requirements of goal achievement and having to be right and having it have to turn out my way. The dramas of life occur because things aren't turning out the way you expected, the way you wanted, the way you demanded. That's the problem. And that's where we get into trouble all the time. Why we wind up yelling at people and throwing fits and throwing the finger at other drivers because that guy cut me off. That was my piece of road in front of my car. Me, my, mine, all words of the ego. So, what would the watcher do? You know, I'm going to come right back to explain it all to you, so don't go away. There's a nice quote coming up here with a nice photograph that I think you're going to like. Don't go away, I'll be right back. Welcome back. So the watcher, of course, is that part of you that observes from perhaps right up here, where it can watch all of the interactions that the ego has with everybody and everything in its life. The ego really wants to be number one. It wants to be the best at everything. It wants to know everything. It wants to be the smartest at all times. The smartest one in the room. You've heard that before. So, what does that mean? Should we just allow the ego to have its way? Well, most people don't even have a clue that that's what they're doing. They just think that's who they are. And I'm here to tell you that's not who you are. Your ego is out of place. It's intended to be your administrative assistant. It's intended to organize everything in your life, to keep schedules for you, to make lists, to make sure you don't miss anything. It's there for that purpose, primarily that purpose. When the ego tries to protect you, it then tries to manipulate situations. It tries to take over. It tries to make sure it gets its way in every situation. Why? So that it can keep you safe. It can do what it thinks is best for you. Sounds like a pretty good thing to me, right? Except most people that are involved, and you know people like this, when they're too involved in their ego, they're not real nice to others. They want it all their way all the time. And things don't always work out that way. And then they get angry, frustrated, hurt, resentful, furious. These are not great ways to be in life, right? It pushes people away. It isolates you. And so you and your ego can be alone with yourself at that point. Not a great way. But if the ego is put into its proper, its rightful position of being your administrative assistant and keeping everything running, keep everything organized, make sure you're doing everything that you need to get done all the time, and then steps back and says, there you go. That's the idea. Now, how do you do that? Well, the ego will not give up its position of control until the master arrives. Now, who's the master? You are. You are already the master. It's just that we forget. We tend to forget, and we tend to think we have to do everything through force of will, which is, again, the ego. The master is that part of you that is filled with mastery of presence. Now, when you're present, you don't have to force things. You don't have to push things. You don't have to push people. It just happens because you're in the flow of the universe when you're present. When you are present more often, you can start to become observant, become the watcher, and see what the ego is up to. When you start to watch the ego, when you start to take yourself up here, your mind goes up here and you go, oh, look what the ego is doing now. Ego goes, what? I got caught. I'm now being observed. The ego does not like to be observed. It likes to do its dirty work, shall we call it, in the dark. It doesn't like to be seen for what it is. Have you ever seen somebody who's a bully, and as soon as the bully gets called out, they go, oh, I'm sorry, and they walk away because they got found out? Somebody who's a manipulator, as soon as they get found out, the manipulation is displayed, they want nothing more to do with it. They'll walk away. Now, those are extreme examples, but there are plenty of things that go on all the time. As soon as it gets seen, the ego loses its breath and walks away. And that's what the purpose of the watcher is, because the watcher just watches all the time. It knows the right thing to do. It knows the right way to be. And the ego does too, but the ego ignores it, hoping to gain an advantage, to do something for you, to make things better for you, but not in a good way. And so the idea here is to watch the ego, become the watcher. Now, as you become the watcher, you actually do it from presence. Because in presence, there can be a part of you that just kind of goes up here and watches. The ego's yakking away, doing its thing, manipulating away, judging everybody, being angry, being dramatic. And the watcher just comes in from time to time and says, I see what you did there. It doesn't even have to say a word. It just knows. As soon as the ego realizes, it goes, oh, stops, pulls back. And now we're in presence. See, you can't be in the ego and in presence at the same time. So what happens is the ego will be doing its thing, the watcher just sort of does this, and the ego goes, quiets down immediately. It realizes it's being seen for what it is. It doesn't like that. It doesn't want to do it. Plus, you can't be present and in the ego at the same time, because the ego is the past and future. Presence is now. So as you become present, as you become more and more present, and the way in which you do that is by being present. You just are here now. Now, I've shown you how to do that before. You can see it on YouTube under Ted Robinson EFT. Ted Robinson EFT. There's a bunch of videos there on how to become present. You just are here. The best way to do it is to use your eyes. Look at something that's here. Check out a flower, or a plant, or a painting, or a person. Look at them. Look at one of those things. You can look at the ceiling, you can look at the wall, or a floor, a painting, or a rug. Just look at it for a moment. Think nothing. Don't judge it. Don't say, oh, the ceiling is getting dirty. None of that. Just look at the ceiling. Quiet the left brain. Quiet the ego mind down. As soon as you quiet it, you're present. Now, before I was saying, well, you're going to watch the ego from presence. Actually, the mind is there always watching anyway. But it's about putting your attention on the watcher. And then the ego gets seen. And it pulls back. That's the idea of becoming the watcher. Now, as you do that, as you become aware of what you're seeing, of what you've said, what your ego has said, you'll suddenly start to see various things that your ego does to aggrandize itself, or to look better in your eyes or under other people's eyes. It just doesn't have to happen anymore. And you, when you're in presence, you can say, you know, I'm just going to be here now. And that's the difference. When you're just here in presence, you're here now. There is no past, there is no future. There's just now. And then what happens? As you continue to watch, as you continue to observe, the ego just quiets down, because as soon as you're in presence, it can't speak much. In fact, it can't speak at all. So it's a balance between ego and presence, the watcher. As you watch more, the ego recedes. As you talk more and you try to manipulate and do other things for your benefit, set goals, make achievements, do all kinds of things, it's the ego. Every once in a while you come in with a watcher again and see it. As soon as you see it, it quiets down. Now, what I've also noticed is, from time to time, as you're doing this, you'll notice things about the ego just after it's happened. It's sort of like you doing one and then the other. So the ego is going to town, all of a sudden it pulls back for a moment. You come in and you say, I see what it just did. Huh. You don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to say, ego, you've been bad. You don't do any of that. Just by observing, just by noticing, just by watching, the ego will start to stop its behavior, its dramas. All the negative thoughts and self-limiting beliefs will just start to recede and go away. They'll just drop away naturally. Because the more and more you become the watcher, that person, that part of you in presence, the more present you become, the more silent you become, the more here you are. Now, as you become more and more present, ultimately, the ego will not come out from its hiding place. It will start to recede, because you're becoming more and more predominant in mastery of presence. And that's how the master arises in you. As the mastery of presence arises in you, the ego recedes more and more and more, until eventually it capitulates and says, okay, you take over, master. You are the master of presence. I was only the interim driver of the boat or the car. I was here to take over when you weren't able. But now I see you're a master of presence. You're here more often in presence than not. I can back off and take a rest. And you might even say that to the ego sometimes. You know, ego, you've been working really hard. Maybe overtime. Why don't you take a little rest? I've got it. The ego will say, are you sure? I've got it. When the ego is really sure, it recedes. It doesn't have to come back out. And the good part is the dramas in your life subside. Things start to get more joyful and joyous. Love starts to become more predominant. And here's the best part. You no longer have to be the watcher, watching the ego. There just becomes watching, observing, being in presence. And then there's silence. That's the whole trip. That's the trip from here to here. You've never left. You've always been the master. You've just forgotten. We all forget. We all wind up going into our egos. But now the trip, the journey, is from the head back to the heart. Receding the ego, bringing forth the master of presence. You. Remembering who you are in presence is really what it's all about. As you do that, you'll find that the world opens up. Heaven literally descends to this level. And you feel everything, you see everything. Everything becomes more and better than ever before as you become more and more present. And that's the real journey home to you. In silence. I hope this has been helpful. So become the watcher and change your life. Observe instead of having to act, do. Just be here now. And you'll see major changes and shifts in your life. Everything will be better. I hope this has been helpful, as I said before. And I want to let you know that here at the Center for Inner Healing, which is where this is coming from, we're located at 26 St. Paul's Place in Hempstead, New York, 11550. And our internet website location is centerforinnerhealing.com. Centerforinnerhealing.com. That's all one word, all spelled out. All words, no numerals. And I want to also remind you that every Wednesday night at 7 p.m., from 7 to 9 p.m., we have a borrowing benefits group. And that's $20. Nobody is turned away at the door. We want everybody to come. Everybody is welcome, from beginners to expert EFT practitioners are even invited here. And also on Sunday evenings, we do an EFT borrowing benefits group on the telephone, which is going to be going onto the computer soon under Google+. So if you want to get part of that group, just sign up for Ted Robinson EFT there as well, and we'll get you on there as well. If you'd like to know more about the Tapathon on Sundays, just go to our website at centerforinnerhealing.com and look at the EFT page under Tapathon. That's a Sunday night at 7. It runs from about 7 to 8, and it's a free telephone call, although you do need to use a free or almost free phone service. My services are free, but the phone is, because we just use that particular service. It can be costly, so we suggest you use a cell phone or something else that's free for you. And that's about it for now. So, this show has been all about becoming the watcher, and I think you'll really benefit by becoming the watcher. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time, same same place. Have a great day.